The South African Federation of Trade Unions say the employment relations at Damelin and Central Education colleges are abusive and unprofessional. According to SAFTU, some lecturers and other staff have not been paid their salaries for the past 3 months, and therefore they'll be spending Christmas without their pay. SAFTU is calling on these institutions to urgently pay workers before further steps are taken. Let's bring in SAFTU's spokesperson about this, Trevor Shaku, who joins us now via our video link. And Trevor, it's great to have you on the program. Happy Christmas to you if you do celebrate, but of course not a happy Christmas for some of these workers at these institutions. Tell us what you know to be the case around their pay issues there at the very least.
Thanks for having us, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers, and Merry Christmas to them also. Look, the problems at Damelin and other institutions that are managed by Educor, which is a holding investment company that operates about 5 of the higher education institutions, including Lyceum, CTC, ISISA, and Cityvarsity. Some of these institutions managed under Educor have not been paying workers consistently over the past year, and the workers give testimony that these problems started after COVID-19. But this year, they've escalated to the point that every month, workers were not receiving their salaries on time. And all the time, and every end of every month, for instance, they would only be receiving their salaries for the past month. And now this has become a problem which we, as the South African Federation of Trade Unions, took when the workers approached us in October. And we wrote out a statement, and we also wrote to the managers, especially the managers of the city campus at Braamfontein of Damelin. We also wrote and tried to call the head office. Of course, there were no responses from them, and we began the process of trying to recruit them so that we can start formal representation of these workers to their company. But now, after they paid the salaries for October, they paid them very late, 25 days later, after the payday, even though they had even issued pay slips to the workers. But what had happened now is that workers have not been paid their December salaries and their November salaries. There are those in various campuses who may have received their November salaries, but certainly none of them has received a December salary. So we are lamenting this because we think that workers have sold their labor because they thought they marked. As we speak, they just finished marking, coming from marking centers. Some of them I spoke with yesterday evening told me that they're coming from the marking centers where they were marking the national papers for the exam closing the 2023 academic year. So we have such particular problems, and we think that management has to do all in its power and has to do everything to ensure that it compensates the labor power that has been sold to them and that has been rendered. In other words, what has happened here is that the workers have credited the company with their labor power for which they have not been paid. It's more like a debtor. Workers have lended their labor power and they are not receiving any payment for that. So we are calling on the Damelin, Educor in general, to pay their staff members.
Right. And did I hear you correctly, Trevor? Did you say that you have tried to engage these institutions and you haven't been able to receive any response?
We haven't been able to receive any response. I wrote, first of all, I personally called the campus manager of Braamfontein Damelin. I also tried calling the campus manager of Pretoria campus, and I did that without success. I then requested numbers and emails of the people who are managing the Damelin, especially at the national level, who are based in Durban. And even them, I could not be able to reach. So this is the problem, because they are not able to respond. I also left SMSs for them, actually, to ensure that if they had not seen my calls, or they've seen the calls, but they were, because people do not answer calls which from numbers they've not saved on their phone book. What was meant to be achieved by that SMS is to let them know who we are and why we are calling them. But they did not respond. And this is problematic because they are not also engaging the workers themselves, because there are workers who have been trying to resolve these issues internally before they approached us. But these workers are telling us whenever they submit these grievances of late payments, they are told that they know the door, meaning they should leave and resign if they have any other complaints. And in our view, that is very unprofessional. We can't have a management of a company that does not even know how to handle grievances from workers, and especially grievances not amongst workers, but grievances of workers to the management itself. And they know, as a matter of fact, that they've not been paying these workers, and therefore, in our view, they should have acted swiftly to ensure that they resolve the issue. Failure, they should be able to explain to the workers, but they are not able to engage the workers properly. When we step in, they are not responding to our communiques.
Yeah. You know, on just the surface level, anybody who's hearing of the story for the first time will think to themselves, these institutions are obviously going through a very serious financial crunch, and that's why, in part, they're unable to pay these salaries. But my understanding is that they're giving away bursaries worth about R1 million, if that's the right figure, for the 2024 academic year, which I guess is a bit confusing, for lack of a better term. With that in mind, what do you reckon is actually taking place there?
Look, we were puzzled because I went through their website and I find this type of an advert where they are saying they are offering students a share of the 1 million that they are offering in bursaries. Of course, that is to lure students to come and register. Fine. But we think that that money must be used to pay the workers. You can't have workers who work, sell their labor power for 2 months and cannot receive any compensation for that particular time. We think that instead of utilizing that money to lure students, look, Damelin already has a reputation, and therefore we think that there's no need to be luring those particular students. Of course, if you are coming with marketing strategy to try to bring as many students to enroll with the institution, that's fine. But you should be able to do that with a budget after you have paid the staff that makes that institution to be what it is. Because that institution is what it is because of those workers. Yeah. Both the cleaner, the securities, but also including the lecturers. Because here also the lecturers are the ones that are suffering.
Absolutely. You mentioned that Damelin has a reputation, and that's where I was going to go next. You know, it's a bit surprising that this institution finds itself in an issue like this, and there's real concerns now about the harm to their reputation that all of this will cause, and the ripple effect that will ultimately have on workers and students alike, the value of the qualification.
Indeed. And in fact, if you look at it, for instance, just taking one of the grievances workers have submitted to SAFTU, one of which was that they are understaffed and therefore they are overwhelmed by workload. Now, the workload that is given to them, one lecturer, for instance, would be teaching about 9 subjects. 9 modules. That's what they told me. Now, imagine to parents and the students who are valuing that particular institution and they are taking their children there. These workers are working under fatigue and they are not being paid. Sometimes when they are not paid, they are not even able to go and attend classes at school because they cannot travel between home and the workplace. Now, who suffers in the midst? It is the student who, at the current moment, they are using the 1 million to try to lay into that particular institution. That's the first part. But the second part is that we actually have to debunk the myth that has been perpetuated that the public sector is more inefficient than the private sector, because Damelin, with its reputation that it has built over time, is now showing that it is inefficient in many ways. It is unprofessional in terms of handling employer-employee grievances. It is unprofessional in terms of payment because there's always late payments. It is unprofessional in terms of handling the contracts of workers. For instance, some of the workers have been working there and were retrenched after 2021, but were rehired on fixed-term contracts. But the Section 198B, which was amended in 2015, gives a provision that says any person who is employed on a fixed-term contract, of course there are conditions there, but any worker who is employed on a fixed-term contract, if the employer wishes to renew such particular contracts, they must absorb them permanently as the staff of that particular institution. Those workers have been working there without their contracts being renewed and absorbed into the staff role. In fact, what they have done is to try by all means to reduce as many lecturers as possible. And this has been problematic when, in terms of delivery of quality education to the students who are enrolling there. But secondly, of course, in the livelihoods of workers, because it is workers who are affected by the work overload, but also the late payments.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly troubling and untenable, Trevor. And of course, Damelin and EduCore, broadly speaking, are both welcome to give us their side of the story. But for now, Trevor Shaku, let me thank you for your time. Really do appreciate it. Trevor is the spokesperson of SAFTU.